our little Eastern coastal bats. They're the second smallest bat in North America. And these guys have spent their whole life around us. Yeah, they have to either stay up in the ceiling or stay flying. If they land on the ground, they can't take off. When they fly, they look like big moths. There's some more down here. Let's go away, but there should be some more down here.
See that little dark thing in the
কালকে ছবিটা খুব সুন্দর হয়েছে আজকে দেখলাম সাথে সাথে যাওয়া হয়ে গেছে
This is crazy.
Alright guys, so the first thing we do when we bring you down here is kind of the touristy thing, and we will take your picture. That way if you choose to purchase one, you have a memento of your afternoon with us. And also it serves a purpose in case I lose one of you guys in the cave. Fossilized coral bed. And you can see up in here little more detailed pieces of coral. And right here. And the things that look like sticks are actually little prehistoric shrimp burrows. So little shrimpies would burrow in there and live their little shrimpy lives. So this is all here because about 125 million years ago or so, the whole state of Texas was covered by a shallow ocean. And when the plates began to shift, that ocean was sucked back to become part of the Gulf of Mexico. So at that time we had like the perfect climate for fossilizing. So we have a lot of like aquatic fossils. And then after that, the Ice Age came. And with the Ice Age came a climate change, and the climate inside and outside the cave changed up, and we got this humidity that we have now. And you cannot fossilize anything in the humidity. It doesn't work. So a lot of the bones that we found throughout the cave are from the Ice Age. They're actually bones, and so they're very dry, they're very brittle, and we start to dig them out and they'll start to break apart and crumble. So that's why we have a lot of bits and pieces upstairs on display, and then we actually have another display case further out in the cave, just little fragments and stuff. But any of the actual fossils we have are from the sea, under the sea. This right here that looks like a big old nacho chip and some dip is actually a stalactite called a drapery, because it grew at an angle. So it's like if my arm were the cave ceiling and it's kind of curved, and I hold a sponge, and that water's going to drip down along the curve of my arm. So over thousands of years, it's going to deposit thin strips of calcite, and it's going to eventually drip down to become the drapery, which met the stalagmite halfway, and now they're best friends forever. Some of the drapery will look like this, like a nacho chip, or it'll look like a pig's ear that you give your dog. And then some of them, when they're gathered together in bunches, look like the guy from Pirates of the Caribbean, Davy Jones, squid chin. So when you ever see that, it's all drapery, and they're all just different kinds of stalactites. So now we're going to go this way. In this room down here, you will not get any kisses. So sorry. All dry.
Oh my gosh.
And there's the humidity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got more since it's more.
Yeah, that's humidity for you.
It's a big cloud of yuck. But yeah, we could carry a thermometer. It'll be 72 degrees, but the humidity is what fluctuates. You guys come on down this way. Gather round. Like I said when we first came in, it takes about 100 years for a cubic square inch. That's a lot of square inches, and we are rock people, not math people, so we don't know. This right here, it was easy to do. This is about a ½ inch apart. So in about 50 years, this is actually called our kissing column, and they're engaged right now. In 50 years, they're going to get married, and they finally get to have their kiss and be as one to make a full column. So, how old are you? So when you're 56, if you come back, it'll be a full column. That's a long time to wait, huh? And if there's a drought, you can't come back to your 66. So we don't water coming in. But we also have in our first formation room a little ice cream parlor because we have our giant Texas-sized ice cream cone right here, the super-sized sundae, and then of course all the crazy kids lining up to get ice cream. Over here we got our giant super-sized ice cream sandwich with some Rocky Road ice cream in the middle, which is really just Yellowstone and church. And then up here in the ceiling is our fossilized coral reef. So back when all of this was ocean, just a bunch of fishies were swimming all around back in there. And up here is where the drapery will start out looking like a kind of like a vein. So it's coming along the curve of the ceiling, and then eventually it'll get a little bit bigger, look maybe like a tentacle, like there, or maybe like some bacon, maybe. And then like there's the pig's ear, and then it'll keep growing, and that calcite will build up. And I don't know when this one broke, but eventually, given enough time and water, it's gonna fill up this whole space and probably be like 2.5, 3 times the size of that nacho chip over there, because it doesn't have a stalagmite to be specified. He's got water built up on his back, that moisture. So when he's sleeping and he wakes up and he wants a drink of water, he'll just drink the water that's on his little fur, and then he'll go back to sleep.
He's so cute, little bat.
When they'll leave the cave to go have their babies in the trees, and then when they bring them back, the oldest formation that we have, we believe to be the oldest one. We have bigger ones that are just as old, but they're almost as old. But it's like 2 or 3 formations will grow together to make one big one. But yeah, 1 inch for 100 years. So if you can really see anything, well, we're kind of far away to see the new ones, but if you're looking and you see something like with your naked eye without the help of anything, it's just a little nub, that's probably already about 50 or 60 years old, because it does take 100 years for an inch. So some of these things are about 1,000 years old up here. They seem so tiny. And then down here in our pit is where we had one of our digs, and so we had a bunch of these going on in the late 60s, early 70s, and they were digging in for 5 years, and then after 5 years they kept finding the same types of bones over and over and over again. So they basically packed up to do other things in the cave, but they left this one here so that we could see how they would plot it out and then dig and sift a little deeper, and then they would, here in this particular area, they went about 3 feet deep to look for some stuff. And I think they found the saber-toothed tiger stuff in here, but I'm not sure. Some people say yes, some people say no, and sometimes my coworkers lie to me, so I don't really believe anything they say. So over in the soda straw balcony, that water will come through, and it'll eat through the limestone and make the formations. This is dolostone or dolomite. It's another sedimentary rock, and it doesn't have calcite in it. Basically, it's like a big sponge, and so instead of the water eating through it, it's going to soak it up over just thousands and thousands of years. And eventually it'll get soaked and saturated, and that water will start to seep through, and we'll have drips, we'll have little puddles, baby stalactites and baby soda straws and little baby stalagmites. And then eventually, after tens of thousands of years, the whole piece will kind of crack and fall off like a piece of a puzzle. And some places in the cave you can walk through and look at the ceiling, and then you can look at the ground and see where the pieces go in the ceiling. I thought I heard something. Over here is some more limestone. This is kind of a rusty color because above it there is iron in the soil. So when the water came down, it brought that rust, that iron, and makes it look rusty. It's also a part of the Balcones fault line, which is extend all the way through Texas, all the way through Texas from Dallas to Del Rio. It's been dormant for like 23 million years, so there's no earth shaking, there's no rocks are gonna fall or anything like that. Up there is the crack that started it all. When the plate shifted, this little crack opened up, the ocean came in to start forming the cave as we know it. It could have happened in a different part of the cave, we just might not have the cave that we have now. Somebody's coming from somewhere. Embedded up in here, these two rocks are actually the same kind. They had a little road going up there before the cave was actual highway system, the feeder road, and the overpass, and the railroad overpass. So they had to make sure that the ground was going to be strong enough to hold up all that construction that's happening over there. So they started doing core samples. And in an acre area, they did about 20 samples, and out of the 20, they hit the cave 8 times. But they didn't know that they were hitting the cave. All they knew is they were losing their drill bits. And the drill bits had diamonds on them. You need diamonds on your drill bits to get to the bedrock. And so diamonds and tools are very expensive. And so they had to figure out what was going on. They lost 8 of them. So they drilled this hole right here. It's about 24 inches across, about 35 feet deep. So as a solid 35 feet is done about 3 or 4, maybe 5 feet of layers of concrete thing, and then the actual pipe. Sometimes with super clients, or there's a lot of traffic, you can hear the traffic passing by. But a guy named Jack Davis got lowered down through here, and when his foot hit the open air, he became the first person, officially the first person in the cave. And they lowered him down onto this, which at first was still pretty with all white here calcite, but then upon further inspection, you discover that it's a huge pile of petrified background. So this is about 17,000-year-old basket. But it doesn't sink because it's huge. And the prince and the princess live in their castle over here with their 3.5 children and their sheepdog named Rex. There's also a dragon that lives in the town, and he is in charge of protecting the king's most valuable possession, the golden star. So in the castle balcony, the only really bad thing that's ever happened in castle balcony is that it flooded one time all the way up to here. This is about 20 years ago. So when we flood here at inner space and when castle balcony flooded, it actually flooded from the ground up. We don't flood from where we come in because we're on top of Edwards Aquifer. So when the aquifer overflows, we get its runoff and the water will just start rising. Like 7 years ago, it flooded to right here. And that was okay because they and some of my friends could swim down in here. Because they said it was all filled with water and it was all clear because that water's super clear like in the rim pool. And that's how it is really even in the back parts of the cave where I've gone swimming. It's super clear, you get in, you kind of muck it up and then you just sit still for a minute and it'll settle back down. It's super clear again. Beautiful. But yeah, 7 years ago, not too bad. 20 years ago, super bad, but we don't think that's going to ever happen again because of the population growth of the surrounding areas. We're using all the water in the aquifer. So no matter how much it rains, we're just going to use all the water. So hopefully that won't ever happen again. But I would like to go swimming down in here. Oh no. We're going to go around this way right here, which looks like it's all. You're going to want to watch your heads coming through here. All right. And this was a huge opening right here. But then the water from the ice melting soaked in, the ceiling got weak, and then there was a huge earthquake. And then an area the size of a football field fell 50 feet into the ground. And all the dirt and rock and debris came in, and that's called the wash. And then of course animals fell in, their remains fell in. And then when we discovered the cave, we had people come and do some exploring, and they found 44 different types of animals' remains in the cave. And 11 of them are from the Ice Age, and so they're extinct. And I really don't, personally, I don't know if how many lived in the cave, or how many like fell in the cave in the hole, or how many got washed in the flood. Like I don't think the mammoth was down here or anything, but I don't know. And I was listening to a podcast the other day that said there was like different things. Like I said, we do have laws protecting the cave, and we can either be fined up to $25,000 or go to jail, and we don't want any of those to happen. And so we put this one aside so that way we can touch it. However, because we're mammals, and here's the science part, because we're mammals, we have dirt and oils that are naturally on our skin. So if we touch the cave, all that stuff's going to deposit from our hands onto the rock. And basically we'll be killing the rock with our bare hands because no formations will form because the water and calcite will drip right off. Kind of like how there's no formations here. So this rock was originally, I think, started by the explorers. They were touching it, coming out of the mud that used to be here. So now we just put it aside, and you guys can come touch it as much as you want and feel it. And it's basically like a big polished rock, but this is what would happen if we touched the cave continuously. It would be all like this, and then we would have no formations growing. But go ahead and give it a touch. And then after this, I was always afraid of the dark. I'm like, the spirits are going to get me. And then I came down here, and I'm like, oh, I love it.
I got a quick question. Have you seen Batman?
Not in the cave. Not in the cave, not yet. Wall. So basically this concrete wall is holding up the side of that sinkhole that we were just at. Otherwise we'd have a whole bunch of dirt and debris kind of yucking up our trail here. But when we put it up, it was very plain and boring. So they had a guy named Michael Frary come from the University of Texas in Austin to do some artwork on it. And he drew some pictures of some of the animals whose remains were found in the cave. The giant ground sloth is from the Ice Age, and he is extinct, thank goodness, because like a full-grown male on his hind legs could be 17 to 20 feet tall. and he's on his all fours. He's like the size of a small SUV. Ecliptodont, first prehistoric Pokemon. But he is kind of like a little tank. He looks like an armadillo, but he could not roll into a ball because his shells were fused together. And if you like were to look up his skeleton online, like on Google his little skeleton, he looks like a tank. But he was about a ton and was probably maybe the size of a smart car, I'd say. This is the Equus. So the modern horse that we know and love came over on the Columbian Exchange, but before that we actually did have horses in North America. They originated here. The Equus is one of those horses, and this is actually as big as it got. So it's kind of like our first mini horse. And in some pictures he looks kind of like a big weenie dog. Black-tailed prairie dog is not extinct. He's not in this area anymore, but regardless, he has not really changed much in like 26,000 years. So he's going to keep on surviving like with the cockroaches and stuff. A saber-toothed cat. We found some saber-toothed cat remains and then some peccary remains. The peccary is just a big old hog. And then we found some camel bones because we used to have camels in North America. Our camels didn't have humps over here because we had a lot of water. But whenever you find camel remains, there will never be humps because it's made of cartilage and so that it disintegrates. So you have to date the bones and figure out where they were and if that area had water when the camel was around. And then no human remains, but they put the little 6-foot humans to show scale for our 16-foot Columbian mammoth. The woolly mammoth was a little bit smaller and only came as far as Kansas. Bigger and better, so came to Texas. Fragments. See, we tried to pull the tusk out, it broke up. And then like this one looks pretty like intact, but then you flip it over and it's all.